Yeah. This is a smoke break song, or it might be a coffee song. Just everyone sing along. Go and take a pee. This is a smoke break song. Lunch lady's smoke break song. She doesn't write them to be alone. That's just the way it's gonna be. So what are y'all into? Hey Richie, have you drank a few? Back in '93. This is a Pete dance song. Everybody better be getting on. Sit on the pot and pee, even if you have a wee. This is the beefcake song. He needs coffee for his drive to be gone from the house so he can make some money. This is an Aussie song. Everyone just sing along. We'll sing hey true blue and green with the cooey. This is a British song. It's a quite proper song. We will all go mad unless you sing along. Okay, that's long enough for our professional smoker. Come back to your chat, great host Lee. Hotbox that cigarette. Your song is over yet? My words I'm starting to forget because we don't ever sleep. Hit the like chicken, LL Cool Mom out. I'll be one ticking, LL Cool Mom out. Everyone just sing along. We'll sing hey true blue and green with the cooey. This is a British song. It's a quite proper song. We will all go mad unless you sing along. Okay, that's long enough for our professional smoker. Come back to your chat, great host leading. Hot off that cigarette. Your song is over yet? My words I'm starting to forget because we don't ever sleep. Hit the like chicken, LL Cool Mom out. Hope you want chicken, LL Cool Mom out. How? In the studio we laugh all day. She's got that sass in every way. Talking fast, not a pause in sight. Leanie's got my head in a spin tonight. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair. Just give me a breath, let me share. Podcast queen with a wicked smile. Running jokes, mile after mile. Try to speak, but in she slides. Leanie makes it a wild ride. It a wild ride. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair. Just give me a breath, let me share. Oh, Leanie, don't get me wrong. Can't imagine life without your song. But girl, you've gotta let me in. This ain't just your show to win. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Leanie laughs, guess it's gonna stay a little secret every day. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Leanie laughs, guess it's gonna stay a little secret every day. Oh, shut up, Leanie, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair. Just give me a breath, let me share. Let me share. just too sure to win. Oh, shut up, lady, can't you see? You talk so much, it's drowning me. With your white hair and sassy flair, just give me a breath, let me share. Oh, lady, don't get me wrong. Can't imagine your life without your song. Girl, you've gotta let me in. This ain't just your show to win. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Leaning laughs, guess it's gonna stay our little secret every day. So here I stand with my mic in hand, trying to keep this show as planned. Leaning laughs, guess it's gonna stay our little secret every day.
Hello. Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Do me a favor, hit the like. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, helps the channel a lot. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for being here. Yeah, we have a special guest. Billy Joe's here. Thank you for coming. I know you're exhausted, girl. April T. Hello, sister. Good to see you. Miss Joyce is here. William is here. And TLC is listening while working. Girl, we're going to get you through this day because we're going live at least twice today. We're going to do the Coburger Normal Thursday Q&A with Maggie later and anybody else who wants to join. And then right now we have a special guest. Let me go ahead and drop the link for him. Excuse me. Go ahead and take the link. And while he is, wait a minute, there it is. Okay. While he's taking the link, I'm going to kind of explain to you what happened. So this week, this sexy beast of a man got selected for jury duty. And he was seated right away with the first 5. And so he's been in court all week, all the way up until after 11 o'clock last night. They were deliberating until after 10, and then they had to go back into the courtroom to give the judge the verdict. And I will let him explain all of that to y'all when he gets up here. All right. Hello, you good-looking son of a bitch.
Hey, everyone.
As y'all know, this is my beefcake. Yes, Miss Barbara, beefcake is up here. The one and only who married me 3 days a week because it was the best I could do. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. So Beefcake got summoned for jury duty. I was really shitty with him because I didn't. And this is the second jury trial you've been on in your life, right?
It is. I've been called twice and been seated as a juror twice.
And the first one, what was it for?
First one was capital murder in Oklahoma.
Were you scared when you had to go? When did you find out it was a capital murder trial?
So you find out what the charge is whenever all the potential jurors go into the room to start the voir dire process.
And that was a word I had to learn because you had texted me a couple times through it and you had told me that you were seated. And then you said, now we're going through the voir dire. Is that what it's called? I didn't know what the hell that meant, but you couldn't text me back. And because you didn't, I had to go look it up. So I learned something new about the court process and the different words that they use through that one. So can you explain exactly what the voir dire part is?
Yeah, so it's basically so for the first trial, I was the last juror seated. They had taken everybody up there, and so voir dire is whenever they did it a little bit differently in Oklahoma. They questioned each juror individually. So you go up and you sit down. They swear you in, and then you sit down, and the defense attorneys the prosecutors get to ask you some questions, and then the defense attorney gets to ask you some questions. And they can excuse you for any number of reasons: the way you look, the way you talk, your views, something you said. They don't really have to have a good reason to excuse you. So in Oklahoma, that's the way it worked. They did everybody individually. In Indiana, they did us as a group. So I was the first group that was the group of 12 that was seated in the jury box. And they asked all of us the same questions as a group, and then they would call on whoever they wanted to answer that question. After both sides were done, I really didn't think, because one of the questions they asked was, have you ever been on a part of a jury before? And whenever I raised my hand, they asked, what was the trial? And I told them it was a murder trial. And they asked what the outcome was, and I told them it was guilty. And because of that, I really thought the defense was going to excuse me. But
Okay.
they excused all but 5 of us. So there were 12 there total. Sorry, there were 14 because there were 2 alternates. And they excused all but 5 of us that first round.
Okay. So they kind of go through it with rounds. Let me tell you what the dictionary says about voir dire. It says a preliminary examination of a witness or a juror by a judge or counsel. So exactly what you said. I just want to make sure you know what you're talking about, even though I know what you're talking about. So obviously they did not turn you away like you thought you were going to get out of it.
Yep.
And then, so at what point, so the trial was about an attempted murder on a police officer.
Correct. Yeah.
And at what point did you learn that it was an attempted murder case? Because that's when I really got shitty. I found out.
Whenever you walk into the courtroom, it says State of Indiana versus the guy, and it's public record. So
we could say his name. It's fine.
Yep, his name is Trenton Wade Patterson. And when you sit down, the judge, so we all went to the jury box. The other 80 people who were summoned to be a part of this potential jury were seated in the galley. They were seated in the audience, where the audience sits. And then the judge reads the formal charges to everybody. So you know right then what it is. Because I think they want people who have some anxiety or some history around those types of things to know what it is. So if they feel uncomfortable, then they
Uh-oh, I lost you. I lost him. You guys do me a favor, hit the Oh, yeah, but you're like playing a record. You're zipping a record. You got a little bit too far away from where I am, I think. Or our Wi-Fi. You're good now, I think. So go ahead. Hello. A little bit better, yeah.
No, hang on a second.
Now it's bad. Go in the garage. Where are you at? You sitting out front? I don't know where you're sitting.
Why is it not?
You're all blippy. Wherever you just moved from, that's what changed it. All right. So while he is figuring that out, I want to pull this up because I want to give you a background on the case that we're talking about. Okay. Let me pull this up real quick while you figure out a comfortable situation for you to sit in. All right, let's pull this one up. Let me make it big so you guys can see it. Put this on screen by yourself. All right. Yeah, that's it. All right, so this is the trial he sat on all week, you guys. I want to go past where. So this is the picture of the gentleman that was on trial this week. Mm, all right. I don't want to do the updates. An updated update. I don't want to do the update. So let's do this one then. Let's see. Hold on. Give me just a second to figure this out because that one is an updated one. And let's pull this one up. Uh-oh. All right. You back?
I am.
All right. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to read really quick the presser on this guy.
Okay.
All right. So here is his a better picture of him. And
That's pretty much what he looked like.
really
Yeah. He didn't change much.
didn't change much. All right, so let's read what the presser was that was put out. In Delville, Indiana, a Delville man who kicked off a manhunt after firing shots at police officers is officially charged with attempted murder. Trenton Wade Patterson Sr., 48, was taken into custody on February the 16th after surviving a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest. He now faces what could be a long stint in prison after being charged with 2 counts of attempted murder, which are level 1 felonies. Patterson also faced various other felony charges, including unlawful possession of a firearm by a serious violent felon, resisting arrest, and pointing a firearm. Previous reports detailed the manhunt that was launched after Patterson opened fire on the police February 15th during a traffic stop in Delville. Court documents reveal how police pulled Patterson over near Main and Spring Streets, with the officer recognizing Patterson and being aware that he had outstanding warrants in Madison County. The officer called for backup before then ordering Patterson from the vehicle. Patterson ended up fleeing on foot towards the splash pad while police chased him with a taser in hand, threatening to stun him if he didn't stop running. Officers kept chasing Patterson until they reached the railroad tracks near State Road 32 and Main Street. It is here that Patterson is accused of raising a handgun and firing 1 or 2 shots at the pursuing officers. The officers dove for cover under their report. Now you'll find out why he's laughing about this later. Let's just say don't always believe the news, okay? The officers dove for cover under their report and lost sight of Patterson. Neither officer was injured or struck by Patterson's gunfire. A manhunt was kicked off, and the following day, Patterson was spotted not far from where he allegedly shot at police. Patterson ran again from officers and crouched down behind a truck on South Beck Street, according to the court documents. Patterson was still armed with a handgun, leading to an officer firing 1 shot towards Patterson, who wasn't struck. Patterson took off on foot, jumping over several chain link fences and cutting through backyards. Police ended up spotting Patterson hiding behind a maroon Pontiac Grand Prix in the backyard of a home of the 4000 block on Main Street. Patterson refused to exit the vehicle, and police eventually shot canisters of pepper spray through the rear windshield of the Pontiac. Patterson exited the car and was taken into custody. Officers noted that Patterson was wounded, with the man telling police that he shot himself in the chest. Patterson was transported to the hospital and survived his injuries. Court records note that Patterson isn't permitted to own a firearm due to being a convicted felony, domestic battery in the past. If convicted of attempted murder, Patterson could serve between 20 and 40 years. And you're breaking up again, honey. Oh, you're coming through the house. So that's the first. Okay, I like this. A surprise live. Hi, Lolly. Good morning, Hopes. Good to see you. Thank you for being in here. I think Beefcake's laughing, and I kind of giggled at it because, of course, I grilled him this morning, y'all. I was in bed when he got home from court last night, and I grilled him. The minute he woke up, got his coffee, I was like, what happened? I want to know everything. But April says guilty right away and says that he's lucky he is to be alive. Yes. But we're going to hear what they heard in court, what the verdict is, hopefully in like a shorter impact than that. You have to get your new headsets on. He's going to get his different headsets, you guys. We're going to hear how it all went down, just in case you're just getting here. This is Beefcake up on panel, and he served as the floor. What is going on with the sound? He served as the floor person for the jury on this trial, and it ended last night. He texted me about 10 something last night and said, we're finished. And then, but I was asleep. And then they had to go back into the courtroom, read the verdict. The judge, all the lawyers, the defendant, everybody stayed at the court all them hours and waited for them. So he didn't get home until after 11 o'clock last night because of how long it took. It took him a long time to reach a verdict. And you know, even when I saw him yesterday, got to come home for lunch, and the state had already retired and all that, and he was waiting. They were going to go back after lunch, get their instructions from the judge, and then start deliberations. And they were told, we will not leave here until we have a guilty verdict. But he thought it was going to go by fast. He just said, I think it's going to go by fast. And then it didn't. So it was hours and hours, hours. So welcome back, Beefcake. You good?
Yeah.
You're good, right?
Yep. Yeah, I got rid of those headsets.
Okay. All right. So
Can you
here we
hear
are. I can hear you. Just stay still. Stay real still. Did you you hadn't read anything on this guy. You knew nothing about this guy. That's the first you've heard that I just read, right?
No, I didn't know. I hadn't heard about it, and I didn't know mainly because.
Oh
they
man, you're
typically don't
breaking up
watch.
so bad. Are you sure it won't work better in the office? Because you're breaking up really, really bad. Now you're not. Now it sounds clear. Did you just turn it off? Oh, mercy. Just gonna have to put my headphones on him and come in on my phone. That's what I'm gonna have to do. Sorry about that, guys. We're not used to going live together. He's always like,
Is this better?
that is much better.
Okay.
All right. So let's get into it. So now you're seated now you're seated, and you don't know this guy from Adam. You think you don't know any of the cops. All the names that they gave you about everybody involved, just like, nope, never heard of them, not me.
Yeah.
And trial starts. So tell us from that moment, like going into opening statements, you can see the defendant, obviously. What was your first thought? But before I ask you that, did you go into this really with a clear mind? Like, did you really go into it like, and be honest? Did you look over and be like, oh, you freaking thug, or oh, you pompous asshole? Did you have any opinion of the guy at all when you saw him?
No, I mean, he looked kind of like the picture you showed. His beard was longer, but he just looked like an older person who had been charged with a crime.
Okay. All right. So then you go into opening statements, and this is the first time that you're finding out exactly all of his charges and exactly what had happened.
Yeah.
So start from there. What did you hear? What did you hear?
So the first thing they do is after they seat the jury, they get to 12, then you have to leave while the judge prepares the instructions. Then that took probably 30 minutes or so, and then you come back in and the judge swears in the entire jury again, because they've let everybody else who didn't get selected leave. They get to go home. So then the judge swears in the entire jury again, and then he starts reading the instructions for the case.
Can I stop you right there just a second?
Yeah.
So you have two alternative jurors.
Yep.
They're not seated in the box with you, but are they sworn in, and do they stay in the trial the whole time?
They do. They actually are able to be in the deliberation room. They just can't have any input.
Oh, okay. And there's a reason why I asked that. One of our youngins is here. Hello, LJ. Welcome. All right, babe, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, we went through the instructions. The judge read the instructions. Those were 18 pages, I think, long. So there was a page for each count. In each count, the state had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt each of the points that were listed that substantiated that charge. So, for instance, for attempted murder, there were 4 bullet points that they had to prove. They had to prove it was the defendant, that he intentionally aimed a deadly weapon at another person, that he fired the weapon, and that and point number 4 was through those other 2 actions that he intended to kill the person that he fired the weapon at. Those were the 4 points that they had to prove for attempted murder to be found guilty.
All right, let me stop you real quick right there. I just need to jump into chat. Hi, Aaron. Good to see you. It's been a minute. You're on your lunch break or you're at work or whatever. We'll try to help you get through the day. This is my husband up on panel. I call him Beefcake. You already know. Everybody knows Beefcake from me talking about him. We are talking to him about a jury trial that he just finished up late last night in our county. It was an attempted murder trial on a police officer. And so this isn't about a child. This one is about his real experience as a juror in a trial and what their verdict was at the end of the night. All right. So go ahead. Go ahead, babe.
Okay. So he read through all of the instructions, and each one of those charges, there were, I believe, 6 total. There was attempted murder on one police officer. I'll call him the short officer because he was maybe 5 foot tall. There was pointing a firearm or pointing a deadly weapon at another police officer, a different police officer. There were 2 counts of resisting arrest. There was 1 count of giving false information, and then there was 1 count of possession of a firearm.
Okay.
So then after he read those instructions, we were asked if we understood them. And as a group, we answered yes. And then he turned it over to the prosecution for their opening statements.
Okay.
The prosecution got up. They gave their opening statements. They were not, a lot of your people probably aren't even going to know who I'm talking about. They were not Perry Mason by any stretch of the imagination. They were, the counsel that provided the opening statements was, if I had to guess, very new at this. I thought he did an okay job. I mean, he gave just the basic facts. This is what we're going to prove. We're going to prove that man right there did these things.
Okay.
And then they turned it over to, his took probably 30 minutes, and then they turned it over to the prosecution, which is interesting. Every time they would do this back and forth, the defense attorney would always move. He would always move the podium to a different spot. And I think that was a tactic of his, trying to just put in everybody's mind, hey, I'm different than them. So he would move the podium to a different spot and normally facing us directly.
Now,
So he
did you
got-
get, I'm going to ask you questions through this. Did you get the chance to look, what is your mind on? Are you staring at the people, the prosecution and the defense as they are talking, or are you looking over at the defendant?
So I was doing a bit of both. We had notepads. We had a copy of the instructions. Each juror had a copy of the instructions. We each had a notepad, and we were encouraged to take notes. But
Hmm.
the judge did say, don't get so caught up in taking notes that you miss what's being presented or what's being said. So I was doing both. I would kind of look at the prosecutor. I probably spent more of this time looking at the defendant because the prosecutor is seasoned. He was a former defense attorney. The defense attorney, he was a former prosecutor for like 14 or 15 years in another county.
Hmm.
I can't remember how long he said had been a defense attorney, but it wasn't that long. I'm going to say less than 5 years. He was much more. At first, he seemed like he was unprepared a little bit.
Hmm.
Oh, sorry. Let me back up. So after the judge reads the instructions, then each side has to stand up and say, "These are the people we're going to call."
Hmm.
Actually, this happened before jury selection occurred. Each side has to list, these are the witnesses we're going to call. The state had 8, I think. Then the defense stood up and said, "We're not going to call anybody. We don't plan on calling any witnesses." And then
Wow.
one of the state head attorney immediately stood up and said, "Judge, can we approach?" And they went up there. When they go up to speak to the judge, they flip a switch and you hear white noise above you, so you can't hear what they're saying.
Uh-huh.
And then they come back, and this is the first time where I thought, "Well, he's kind of unprepared," because then the defense attorney had to say, "We may or may not call these 2 people." So the prosecutor knew that they had originally intended on calling these 2 witnesses, and whenever they said they weren't, he wanted clarification. So then they had to go back and say, "We may or may not call these 2 people during the trial."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but during the defense attorney's opening statements, I pretty much watched the defendant most of the time, and he was watching us like he was watching us kind of the whole time.
Do you think he was watching you as in just looking at you, or because people have different facial expressions? Did it look like a pleading kind of look? Did it look like smug? Did it look like, hello, is
He
anybody home?
he showed no emotion.
None.
I thought that was the first time where I had thought, this isn't his first time here. He was either very well coached or he had been in this situation before. He showed no emotion, was just kind of, to me, he was looking at us to kind of see our facial expressions
Okay.
and see kind of what we were thinking, see if he could figure out what we were thinking based on our actions or anything. He was very engaged. The first trial I was on, I don't remember that guy having much interaction with his defense team at all. He just kind of sat there.
Mhm.
Trenton was very engaged. He was taking notes. After every time his attorney was done, whether it was with those opening statements or questioning a witness, he would always ask the judge for a minute, and then he would go back and talk to the defendant and ask if there was anything he wanted him to ask.
Oh, nice. Okay. So he was definitely helping with his defense.
He was.
All right. So we get through both of the opening statements. You've got an idea now what the charges are, what they're looking for, all of that. So who was the first witness that was called?
The Shorty, Officer Shorty.
Officer Shorty.
So he's the one who the attempted murder happened. It was happened on him. And the reason I
Okay.
laughed earlier is because they didn't dive for cover.
They didn't dive for cover?
There was literally one person pursuing him. So, and it was this officer. So
Mm.
they definitely embellished the story a little bit. So he gets up there and they start through the process. Tell me, how did you come to be in this situation? So in this little town where this officer works and where, well, you said in your, whenever you read it, in Daleville, apparently firemen can also be police officers, and that was the case with this person.
Which
He's a
is really
fireman.
weird.
It is really weird. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
You can tell
Outside of
that's,
like a rural country setting.
yeah, that's real small town stuff.
Mm-hmm. So they said, how did you come to know that Mr. Patterson was in the area? And he said he had received a tip from a firefighting colleague in a different county, in Madison County. So he had received a tip from some firefighter he knew in Anderson that, hey, this guy is wanted for this. They called it an informational warrant. He had an informational warrant out for his arrest, and he is in Daleville, and this is where he's supposedly at. So he said he went, he parked at a church parking lot across the street from where the suspect was at. The suspect was actually living in a camper in the driveway of a house. And he said at one point he drove around the block after seeing he probably went to the store to get him a Twinkie and Diet Coke. But he comes back and he said that he noticed that there was a car parked in the driveway that was running, and the lights and the camper went off. So the car pulls out of the driveway, and he follows it, and within like a block, he pulls it over.
Now they cannot be pulled. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So you can't just pull a car over to pull a car over. There
Yeah.
has to be probable cause. You have to have a cop is not, it happens all the time, but they're not supposed to pull you over to pull you over. They've got have some kind of probable cause to pull you over. So what was the probable cause that they used that they were pulling him over for?
The probable cause that they used was that the license plates on the vehicle did not match the vehicle.
And was that really true?
So,
I guess it would have had to be, right?
Well, the interesting part about that, and the defense actually brought this up whenever they had a chance to cross-examine, the car was not his. He was a passenger in the car. A female was driving. The car was impounded. She was able to go get the car the next day and never received a citation for having the wrong license plates on the vehicle.
Oh, so now we don't even know if that was a lie that
Right.
they made up, because this cop is betting that this person they're looking for is in this car.
Right.
Okay. All right. So we don't know if that's a lie or not. All right. Gotcha.
And that plays into some of the mindset of the jurors later.
Okay.
So he gets out of the car. He instead of approaching the driver's side like most do, he goes around to the passenger side.
Which is really weird.
Yeah.
I have never seen an officer do that unless they're on a really busy like freeway, like in LA, and then they're like keep pulling up, or they'll yell out their window with their bullhorns to go to a safer spot to pull over.
Yeah.
So okay.
So they pulled him over. Where they pulled the car over was right off of a 2-lane state road 32, which is it's the main road going through Daleville. And they had pulled onto a side road, maybe maybe 25 or 30 yards off of State Road 32. No street lights.
Oh, wow.
No nothing. It's pitch black.
Now, does the cop have his body cam on at this time?
He does.
Okay.
So he approaches the passenger side. He asks for identification. The driver gives them identification. There was somebody in the back seat. The driver's the only one who actually gave identification. Mr. Patterson told him that he gave a different name. So at that point, the officer, he said he didn't have identification, and he said, so what's your name? And he gave him a different name.
Okay.
So the officer turns and walks back to his vehicle. He's the only one there. No backup has shown up yet. So he's the only one there. He's walking away from the vehicle, from the car back to his vehicle, which was a police truck, and gets back into the truck and starts running the license of the person driving. But he's having this conversation around saying, hey, I need backup. It's definitely him. He told me, he gave me a different name, but it's definitely him. He matches the description. And he kind of just kills some time until another police officer shows up.
All right, let me stop you right there. Hey, Jay Bradass, how are you, girl? Good to see you in chat. April says, I never heard of a warrant for information. Now that's what they gave you guys, though. That was the court talk, a warrant for information, but you actually found out exactly what that meant through this, right?
Yeah, later, actually, whenever I can't remember exactly when we found it out, but it was actually a warrant for failure to appear. So he was summoned to court on failure to pay child support, and he never went to court. So he had an arrest warrant issued for failure to appear for that summons.
Okay, but you didn't know that at the time. The way the court put it out in their words was just, it was a warrant for information.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. Sorry. I just want to make sure we're clearing it up as we're going along.
No.
All right.
Fine. So another police officer finally arrives, and he drives towards the first officer who's sitting in his truck behind the car. So he's facing the car and the truck with his lights on, kind of lighting the area up a little bit. Officer Shorty gets out and goes over and talks to this officer. I'll call him Officer Old and Fat because that's what he was. And he said, okay, so, it's definitely him. If you can just go to the back of the car, I'm going to get him out of the car and then we can have a conversation with him. So he doesn't go in front of the car. He comes back and walks behind the car and goes back up to the passenger side again. And he hands the identification back into the lady that's driving. And he says, I need you to step out of the car, talking to Mr. Patterson. And Mr. Patterson was intentionally talking very softly. I will say he did everything right. He didn't make any sudden moves. He wasn't aggressive. He did everything right. Very accommodating. Yes, sir. He had to reach outside the car because he claimed that the door handle on the inside didn't work. He couldn't get it to open, even though he's 6'4" or 6'5". He's a tall guy. For some reason, he couldn't reach outside and get it to open. So Officer Shorty opened the car door for him. He gets out, and when he gets out, he has a cell phone in his left hand, and he has a Black and Mild cigar in his right hand. Mm-hmm. And then he walks in front of the officer, and they go back to the back of the car. So now they're standing between the back of the car and the Officer Shorty's truck.
All right, let me stop you right there. Do they have a dash cam on this too?
I did not see dash cam video.
So all we can see is Officer Shorty's body cam.
Yes.
Okay.
During this time, we noticed that Officer Old and Fat had a body cam on as well, and it was recording, because you can tell if it's recording, it lights up.
Mm-hmm.
But we never saw that video.
Oh, wow.
So he looks at Mr. Patterson and says, his exact words is like, "Hey, this can go either really good or really bad. What's your name?" And he gives him the same name he gave him the first time. And he says, "Turn around, put your hands behind your back." And he's like, whoa, wait, that's not my name. And he says, "Okay, what's your name?" He said, "Trenton." He said, "Trenton what?" He said, "Trent Patterson." He goes, "Turn around, put your hands behind your back." That's all he said. He didn't.
Okay.
Now, whenever he's walking, I noticed it immediately. Other jurors didn't notice it until later. He clearly has the gun in his right hoodie. He's wearing a blue hoodie in his right hoodie pocket. You can see it. It's like you can see the outline of it in the pocket.
Wow.
So whenever he says, "Put your hands behind," whenever he says, wait, that's not my name, he puts his Black and Mild into his left hand with his cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, when he says, gives him his real name, and he says, "Okay, put your hands behind your back," doesn't say why or anything, he just says, "Turn around, put your hands behind your back." He kind of takes a small step with his right hand like he's going to put his hand behind his back, and then takes off running right next to Officer Oldenfat, who acted like he saw a ghost. He just kind of puts his hands up and takes a step back.
Oh, wow.
I don't know that he moved any more than that at all. But Officer Shorty starts chasing him. So
Okay.
the video cam is great until they're running. And when they're running, all you hear is heavy breathing, and
Yeah.
the camera is all over the place. You can't really see much at all.
Right.
So they're running, and they go across State Road 32, which is main road. So it's just somewhat busy in the daytime. It's a busy road. They go across State Road 32, and on the other side of State Road 32 is a small shoulder, and then are railroad tracks. The railroad tracks are elevated, and they have rocks, small, probably softball size, a little bit larger rocks that lead up to the railroad tracks, and that's how they kind of keep the soil from eroding. Whenever they have elevated railroad tracks, they'll put gravel or rocks there to keep that soil there.
Mm-hmm.
So they start running up these rocks. And Officer, at one point you can tell he falls down. He falls
Which
down.
one? Which one? The officer or the?
Officer Shorty. You can't really, honestly, other than seeing blue because he was wearing a blue hoodie and blue sweatpants,
Mm-hmm.
you can't really see Patterson at all at this point.
Okay.
You just know he's chasing him because this camera's bouncing all over the place.
Okay.
So you see Officer Shorty fall, and then you hear him say, "Oh shit, oh shit," and you can tell he's moving backwards. And now you see he's got a gun in his hand, and he says, "Shots fired, shots fired."
Okay. You
And
see who's got a gun in his hand? You see that the officer does?
the officer, yeah. Now the
Okay.
officer has a gun in his hand as he's backing up, and he says, "Shots fired." You hear a click, but his gun didn't. His gun jammed, and then you see him rack his gun to expel the jammed bullet and load another one, but he never fires again. And then that's when they turn the video off.
Okay, let me get this straight. So the cop is chasing this guy. He gets caught up on these things. He on the rocks. He kind of falls down a little bit, and at the same time, he thinks he hears a shot. He hears something, a gun going off, and he thinks it's the suspect.
Yeah.
Right. So he's yelling, "Shot fire, shot fire." He takes out his gun. You can see it on his body cam, but yet his own gun
jammed.
It jammed.
Yeah.
Wow. What says you, JB? Okay. So, and then all of a sudden the body cam goes off. Why is that?
Because so there's some information on the screen whenever these body cams are played. It tells you how long the video is, and then on his it said redacted.
Okay, but you're in court, so why would anything be redacted at that point?
because both sides get to choose what they want to present. I'm assuming that both sides saw the entire video and both sides agreed that there was nothing beyond that point that was substantial to the case.
Okay, and we're seeing that through the Koberger thing. There's certain parts of the 911 that they want taken out. Nobody to hear because it's not pertinent to the case. Okay,
Yeah.
so I got that. All right, so what happens next? And just so you guys know, JB, who is a 20-year veteran, retired FBI, that's why I called out for her about the officer's weapon. So weird that I've never heard of an officer's weapon getting jammed, but JB says it probably wasn't a Glock. All right, which if you saw this town, JB, we're talking Mayberry. Okay. All right.
He might
So
have had some hay stuck in the barrel.
that's right. All right. So keep going.
It actually was a Glock, and that was one. So at that time, the prosecution handed the witness over to the defense.
Hmm.
So the defense gets up and they have some questions. They kind of go through. They touched on the gun. He said, "So you stated your gun jammed?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Did you send that gun in to be tested?" He said, "No." He said, "Are you still using that gun?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "So you're still using a gun that you know jammed?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you concerned about that?" He said, "No, I've fired it since then."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because I was, the same thought had run through my mind. I probably wouldn't be using that gun anymore.
Hell no.
So he asked him about the chase and asked him if he saw Mr. Patterson fall. Oh, I'm sorry. Before they handed it over, kind of the tail end of his testimony, they asked, "So how did you know Mr. Patterson fired at you?" And he said, "I saw the muzzle flash. And I heard the shot and I saw the muzzle flash." And they said, "Where did you see the muzzle flash?" And he said, "Right at me." And they said, "So when you saw that muzzle flash, what did you think? What went through your mind?" And he said that I would never see my family again. And that's when they handed him over. So the defense talked about the muzzle flash, asked him if Mr. Patterson fell. He said, "No, Mr. Patterson stumbled, but I never seen him fall." And asked him what they did afterwards, after all of that had occurred. And he said that they retreated, they called it in, they got more people out there. The defense was, with almost every witness that was actually had been on the scene, asked about the number of people that were there. The defense kept trying to get to this like 100 number, like there were 100 people out there that night. I don't know why they felt like that was important.
So this guy's now missing. He's gone. They lost him.
Yes.
Right. So when they say that they called people in, who came in?
So every available Delaware police officer, every available Delaware County sheriff and sheriff's deputies, because it was an officer-involved shooting. The Indiana State Police, they came from Fort Wayne and drove down. They had a helicopter out there. I think the reason why the defense tried to get to this 100 number was because we later learned he never left, and you had 100 people out there and couldn't find him.
And you said they had a helicopter in the air, right?
Yes, yes.
And let me ask you this: Officer Shorty is a canine,
So
and he had a
his
dog.
canine, yeah, this came up as well. The defense asked, because they knew that this might come up, they asked specifically about his dog. And his dog is not a tracking dog. His dog is an evidence dog. So it's not trained to track people.
So why wouldn't the police bring in a tracking dog?
They did.
So how many hours was this guy missing?
They didn't bring in the tracking dog until the next day.
Which is
This
dumb.
happened. This happened at approximately 9 o'clock at night
Mm.
on February 15th. So it was dark. It was very dark. They were all out there again at daybreak the next day. So they were out there 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning the next day.
Yeah, but what gets me about that is this is a small community we're talking about, but it doesn't matter if it's a metro. But this is and they're in actually like a small neighborhood. They know the guy's criminal past. They brought it all up. They know you don't know it. You jurors don't know it because you're not allowed to know it. But they know this guy is he's got a criminal scary record.
Yeah,
And
he's a violent felon.
He's a violent felon, and they didn't bring in the tracking dogs until daybreak around all these houses. And neither did they put out anything on the news or
Absolutely.
anything to have these homes that he very well could have run into and held hostages, or anything could have happened. They
Yep.
didn't have them on a stay in place,
No.
secure yourself in place.
They
So if you weren't on that,
executed a- they
if you weren't on
executed
that, I'm sorry.
they executed a search warrant on a residence in Daleville where his son and his baby mama lived.
Yeah, but that's not keeping the community safe.
Not
So
at
these
all.
guys need some training, big time training. All
Yeah,
right,
there
hi
was-
Maggie.
Hey Maggie.
Okay,
There
I'm
was
sorry.
a lot of there's a lot of opportunity to improve.
I'd say.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be all kind of shitty if some man walked up in my house, because if you're the next street over, you may not necessarily see there's 50 cop cars out there.
Yeah.
You
And
know what I mean? Unless it's word of mouth.
afterwards, knowing that, I mean, because he does eventually testify. The defendant eventually takes a stand and claims he never left. He spent the night in the backyard of a house that was, less than probably 300, 400 yards from where this happened.
Yeah, so could you imagine? It's your backyard this effer's sleeping in, back there hiding out from the cops. You've got 3 kids sleeping in their bedrooms. Oh my God, I can't imagine. All right, let's carry on.
So, then then after the defense is done, the prosecution gets an opportunity to redirect, and then after the redirect, the defense gets an opportunity to I don't know what they call that, because it's not really redirect, but to respond to the redirect.
The rebuttal, yeah.
Yeah. But basically, that was the end of his testimony.
All right, so basically you're going to have other officers, because you and I could talk about this forever. I mean, we must have talked about it for 2.5 hours this morning. So basically you've got other officers that were on the scene that came up and gave the same their testimony of what they saw. This guy's out there. They finally catch him at, do you know what time in the morning?
Yeah, so
So can we get to where they do catch him?
Yeah, so the second one to testify was the one that had the gun pointed at him. So they didn't have a charge, which was also very interesting. I don't know if attempted murder if it encompasses pointing of a firearm, but the pointing of a firearm charge was actually at a different officer, and he was the second one to testify. He did respond that night. He wasn't there very long. He comes back the next day. He's the Delaware County Sheriff, 40 plus years on the job, firearms instructor. He was actually police chief in another town, firearms instructor, hostage negotiator trained by
trained by the hostage negotiating team in New York City. Very well respected. A lot of tenure, a lot of experience. He shows up the next day, and they meet to watch the video, the body cam from the previous night. So they know that a shot was fired. And so the next day they're out there, and he pulls up, and he's in his truck, and he's sitting there waiting on instructions from the person who has the lead investigator for the scene, what they want them to do. And he hears on the radio, white male crossing railroad tracks with blue jogging suit on. And he's pretty close to that area, so he looks, and he says he's about 150 yards away from me, crossing the railroad tracks, and which is a football field and a half, right? So he's 150 yards away, and another officer comes up next to him, and he rolls his window down, and he says, "Is that our guy?" And the other officer testified as well, and he said he didn't know. So he told him, "I don't know." So he gets out, he grabs his stuff, he puts on his body cam, grabs his gun, puts on his jacket. They were wearing a vest, and he starts walking towards this guy that's walking down the railroad tracks or coming across the railroad tracks. And they end up in a residential neighborhood. At one point, the suspect is walking by a truck, and he says he looks at him, and he said the suspect looked over his shoulder at him, and he yelled at him to drop his gun, and then he fires at him. The officer fires at him and misses. And he said, they asked him how close he was at that point. He said he was probably 100 feet, 50 to 100 feet away from him. So he fires at him and misses. He said he kind of jerks a little bit, so he didn't know if he hit him or not. And then at that point, he takes off running. And he gives chase, and he did say, "Look, you guys you're gonna see the video. At this time I was recovering from pneumonia." He said, "So I just want you to understand that that's why I'm breathing so hard." So they played the video, and he gives chase. After he fires at him, he turns on the body cam. He forgot to turn on the body cam when he put it on in the truck. So it wasn't until after he fired at him that he turned on the body cam. And they announced over the radio, "Shots fired." Another officer approaches him, and the first thing he says was, "I'm the one who fired." And
Let me stop you right there. So when you hear that body cam was not turned on, and you're sitting there as a jury member, and you're hearing this body cam was not turned on, it wasn't turned on until after there was a shot fired. What's going through your mind? Are you thinking, are you side-eyeing him? Because I think I would have side-eyed him, like,
No, I didn't find that incredibly unusual. I mean, he had just seen somebody he thought was a suspect in a attempted murder on a police officer. He was in a rush to get out of his vehicle. He put it on. The fact that he didn't turn it on, no. I mean, I have employees that walk into the lab all the time without their PPE on, and it's something that they're supposed to wear every day, all day long.
Okay, because I totally would have side-eyed it. But go ahead, you do. But I listen to a lot more true crime than you do. So yeah.
Yeah. So
all right, go ahead.
He tells the officer, "I'm the one that fired," and the officer said, "What?" And he goes, "I shot at him." And he said, "Okay." And I found that exchange a little bit odd. And then,
why would an officer have to tell another officer, "I'm the one that fired that shot"?
Yeah.
Weird.
So he said he jumped over this fence. And he said he jumped over this fence. So later we find out from the testimony of a different officer that he had to help that guy over the fence. So he gets over the fence, and they're walking through these yards, and they're walking towards what is like a 15-passenger church van. It's not a bus, but church van has windows all around it. And in part next to that, on the other side of it, is a red Pontiac Grand Prix. Both of these vehicles have really dark tinted windows. And so you can see he's on the body cam, he's holding his gun in front of him, right? And the other officer is next to him, and they're walking, and he walks up to this van and is like putting his hands up next to his eyes and looking in this van to see if he can see anything, looking in the windows of this van. And then he tells that officer, "You check out the van, I'm gonna go check in this car." So he walks behind the Grand Prix and walks up next to it. It's a four-door Grand Prix, walks up next to it, opens the driver's side door, and sees the suspect sitting in the passenger seat. And he raises
let me just say this real quick. When they're saying that to you, is all of your spidey senses and all of your hair standing up going, we know this dude has a gun, and you're actually putting your face up against a darkened window to see if the suspect is in there and you know he has a gun? That's terrifying. Who does that?
Yeah, that was a clear mistake on somebody with,
my
with 40
God.
years of experience. That was
I'm embarrassed that you're telling the story about this poor y'all. We don't live in Daleville, just so you know this, okay? But keep going. I'm sorry. That's just crazy. I mean, that would be. I'm not even a cop. Not even. Listen. I want to be a mall cop so bad. I want a badge and some really cool prescription sunglasses, and a ride around on that thing. I'm not even one of those, but I damn sure would not be walking up to any vehicle and sticking my face against it, knowing this perp has a gun.
Yeah.
But keep going. So now he's got the door open. He's sitting in the Grand Prix.
So when he opens the driver's side door, the other officer is literally standing right next to the suspect. He's between the Grand Prix and the van, and he has the door to the van open. So his back is to the suspect, right next to him. So immediately I thought, if he really wanted to kill somebody, I mean, he had the perfect. If his goal was, I'm just going to kill a cop, he had his opportunity. So he opens the door, sees him, and he raises his gun and starts yelling, "Suspect, suspect!" And he backs up to where he's behind the Grand Prix, maybe 30 feet behind the Grand Prix, but he's in line with the open driver's side door.
Now, is that body cam on? Are you watching this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, when he first opened the door on the body cam, could you see his gun anywhere? The suspect gun?
No, I never saw the suspect's gun.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So the other deputy had closed that van door and had run to the back of the van and is standing at the corner of the van looking at the passenger side. And he's yelling at him to get out, throw out the gun, get out. And Patterson, what it looks like, he reaches across the driver's side and grabs the door to close it. But what we find out later is he actually moved into the driver's side seat, and he reaches out to close the door, and his head is outside of the vehicle, and he's looking at the cop with the gun pointed at him. And there's nothing between them at that point. There's nothing. If he was to shoot and miss, he's going to hit the door. He's already shot, in my mind, he's already shot at this guy once and missed. If you really were going to do that again, that's your opportunity, because if you miss, you're going to hit a door. You're not going to fire into a residence, and you're a firearms instructor. You should be able to hit from that range.
Right.
So he's looking at him, and he closes the driver's side door. The officer retreats to the back of the van where the other sheriff is at.
Oh my God! All I see is Barney Fife. Keep going. Really, all I see is Barney Fife here.
Yeah, and then he starts the the hostage negotiations, right? He starts in, which is just, so at first, they said they were going to show us, like, I think they said 10 minutes of this video that was an hour and 45 minutes long. There was an objection made by the defense. They went up, talked to the judge. They went up and talked to the judge. Then the judge said, you know, we need to have oral arguments, so we're going to ask that you leave the courtroom while we do that. So we had to go sit in the green room while they hashed that out. About 20 minutes later, they came back and got us, took us back in there, played the entire video.
Oh,
So
wow.
the defense obviously wanted the entire video played for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So they start the negotiation process, which is just constant talking. You don't really give, I think the point of it is you don't give the suspect time to think, really, time to come up with a plan. You're offering the plan. The plan is, you get out, we're going to treat you like a gentleman, throw your gun out, we're going to treat you like a man. Hey, he actually said, we saw the video, we know you slipped and fell, you didn't mean to shoot at that police officer, nobody's been hurt. Said that several times. Nobody's been hurt. This is your opportunity. It's cold in there. We know you only have one shoe on. Come out. It's warm out here. We've got cigarettes. Offers him a blunt. Calls him an OG. You're an OG. You know how this goes.
He offers him a blunt?
Yeah. He said, we've got cigarettes. Hey, he goes, we got a blunt if you want one.
Well, I guess I'd do that too. Come on, Big Daddy. Come on out.
Yeah. Eventually, so SWAT shows up. They called in SWAT from Muncie. SWAT shows up. They park this big armored truck in front of the car. The car's not going to move. It has 4 flat tires. They parked this big armored truck in front of the car. There's people in the truck that can see in the front windshield. They have a sniper. They said they have a sniper on a roof with line of sight to on the suspect. Then they start shooting projectiles into the back glass. It's been an hour and 45 minutes or so. They're ready to get this over with.
Mm-hmm.
So they shoot one round that's designed to break the glass.
Mm-hmm.
Then they shoot in a canister of tear gas. They wait a few minutes, shoot in a canister of pepper spray. Wait a few more minutes. They're still talking to him the whole time. Then they finally shoot in a can of more potent tear gas. And at this point, they said there's smoke just billowing out of this car. We didn't see that, but that's what everybody who testified said. And he breaks the driver's side door glass with his gun, climbs out. He sits up on the ledge of the door. He doesn't open it. He sits up on the ledge of the door with his hands on the top of the car. Raises his hands. You know, they're all yelling at him. Raises his hands. And oddly enough, I mean, I'm surprised this wasn't the end of this guy. Puts his hand down, and whenever he put his hand down, I figured he's done, you know. Puts his hand down and raises his shirt to show them that he has a bullet wound in his chest. And then puts his hands back up. They come and grab him and put him on the ground, and then the EMS takes over from there.
Okay. Can you answer this question? April wants to know, could you hear the suspect fire his gun on body cam?
No.
That was before it was turned on, right?
No, she's talking about with Officer Shorty. No, the body cam was on, and I could not hear it. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't see it. I really couldn't see much of anything.
Okay.
Or hear anything other than Officer Shorty breathing.
Okay. And JB says, sounds like where she grew up. And then she said that's called a wad cutter, the thing that they break the window with. Hope's Echo's talking about her beautiful dog. All right, keep going.
So that was
So-
the end of his testimony. The defense didn't really. One of the point they and the prosecution, one of the things they ended every testimony of a police officer or a deputy with was, whenever you're trained to shoot, are you trained to wound? And they would always say, no, we're trained to shoot to stop the threat. And in your mind, you know, you're like, why are they asking this question? Why are they asking this question? So then we were also told during the opening statements by the prosecution that the defendant shot himself. Before he got out of the vehicle, he shot himself in the chest. So the defense's claim is that whenever he used the pistol to break the glass, the gun accidentally fired and shot him in the chest.
I'm sorry. At that point, I mean, for me, I wasn't sitting there listening to the whole thing, but that makes complete sense to me. I mean, why would the man try to save his life, try to save his ass from going to jail, but he's gonna kill himself over it? I just don't. I mean, that's plausible to me. Was it plausible to you?
Well, so we know, oddly enough, there was a round found in the driver's seat. There was a spent round found. They called it a deformed bullet, found in the driver's seat. In Indiana, jurors are allowed to submit questions. So I submitted a question about the spent round that was found in the driver's seat.
Mm.
I asked the wrong person. So I asked it again later when the right person was up there, because I said, was there blood on that round? And
Ooh,
the
good
officer,
question.
yeah, so the one that I asked said, I don't know. That it was
Mm.
sent off to the lab, and that's for the technician to determine. And I also asked, was that bullet the same caliber as the gun that the defendant had? And he said, I don't know. That was sent off to the lab. He said I couldn't determine that based on looking at it.
Okay, did you ever get the answer to that?
Yeah, so whenever the lab techs started to testify, they had the weapons specialist said it was not the same caliber as his gun, which they never addressed.
What?
Yeah, but that it did have traces of DNA on it, but not
Whose
enough to
DNA?
be tested. Not enough to be tested.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Because you didn't even tell me that this morning. So the spent round is not even from his gun.
Based on what the technician was able to determine, you're right.
Now, can you go back?
And I
Since
can't
you're done.
imagine it was
Go ahead.
he had a 38. The defendant had a 38. Small. It wasn't a revolver, but it had a small 38 handgun. So he supposedly, you have to imagine yourself sitting in a driver's seat, and you're going to use the butt of this gun to break the glass. You would have to have your thumb on the trigger.
Right.
And then you would have to turn towards it while you're doing it.
Okay.
So if he does that, how does the bullet end up in the driver's seat?
Did the bullet end up in the driver's seat, or the spent round end up in the driver's seat?
Both.
So the bullet went through his body and is now in the driver's seat.
Is in the driver's seat. Would it not? There was an exit wound. So he had an entrance wound and an exit wound. It would have been lodged in the passenger side door. Or
somewhere over there. Yeah, not in this. Did it match any of the officers' guns, or was that even asked?
So, yeah, they asked every officer that was on the scene that day, they asked if there were any rounds fired, and they all said none by any police officers.
Okay. So there was another part that you told me about this guy's gun, how you could put a mag in it,
Yeah.
right?
So
And tell
the
us about that.
the firearms technician, they asked him, so how many rounds would this gun hold? And the mag holds 7, but it was a type, it was a Bursa, so it could be single action or double action. You could manually load a live round into the chamber, so you could technically have 8. Whenever I heard that, and they said, so he said, whenever I received the gun, I received a gun, I received a mag with 5 rounds in it, and then I received 1 loose round that was ejected from the gun. So he received 6, which means that there were 2 that were missing. But I mean, you only do that. You only load that live round. Most people would load a mag, put it in, and then load 1. So you would then have 6 in your mag. You only add that extra one if you really think you're going to need all 8. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
If you're going to do some serious damage. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now that we know all that's happened, and then and JB agrees with you, so you're on the right track, brother. Let's see. So I'm blown away right now that bullet does not match his gun. I want to know. This is what I want to know. Can the bullet, whatever bullet they found in the car, that supposedly went through his body or whatever, can that bullet actually be used in the size gun that I don't know enough about weapons? So is it possible to use that bullet in the gun that he was carrying?
And that's probably a question for JB. He said it was a 30 caliber bullet. He had a 38. His findings was he could not conclude that the bullet came from that gun.
So then where was the bullet that... Oh, wait. Now, you guys, now I'm thinking totally different. Remember you said that when the cop fired, he kind of jerked.
He didn't he had a different caliber. I can't remember what caliber he had, but it wasn't the same.
All right. I need to know. Lunch lady, hello. I need to know. Can you put actual rounds in a different gun? Because he obviously got shot from something.
Right.
And that caliber didn't match his gun, nor did it match the cop gun. So either what's the chances? I don't know, that you're going to find a spent bullet there in the same seat he was sitting in, and that the cops didn't look over to find another bullet somewhere.
Well, this is the other thing I found out is they never take the car.
Why?
So he the whole time he's yelling at him, says, "Hey, your kids want to talk to you. We've got blunts for you, whatever." We could hear him talking, but you couldn't really make out what he was saying. So they would say, "Hey, roll the window down, open the door so we can hear what you're saying." And he never would. So afterwards, whenever he testified, he said you couldn't open the door from the inside. You couldn't open any of the doors from the inside.
Okay.
But there's a picture that the state had of him with the passenger side door open, looking at them.
Oh my God. This gets weirder and weirder. Hello, Sean. Lunch lady, hurry up and get off work, girl. This is a mess. This is a huge mess. All right. So now we've got him in custody. He's in the hospital. Everything's off at forensics. They collected, you told me they got a shoe. He lost a shoe in the mud. He actually had 2 cell phones on him, right?
Yeah. So one of the things, they collected 8 pieces of evidence at the original scene, and one of those was a cell phone. And another one was a holster, a soft holster. And so I asked the question of that juror, exactly where was the holster found, in reference to where the vehicles were at and where the shot was fired. And so it was running, because in my mind, what I needed to what I needed to understand in my mind was how quickly, because whenever I hear that, I'm thinking he took his gun out of his holster. So I need to know how quickly that happened. And it was within 3, maybe 4 strides of him running.
Okay, so I think you're going to get to this part probably when you get into deliberations, because you said that when he first got out of the original car before he took off running, you could clearly on the cam, the body cam, see a gun in his right pocket.
Yep.
Okay. And
He
then
claimed,
hold on. And then he also had a black he switched over his cell phone
Yep.
into his left hand, or his black and mild. Now his left hand is holding a cell phone, a black and mild, and now his right hand is now free.
yeah,
Right before he starts to run.
because he knows he has a gun in his right pocket.
Right. So they took in, let's get back to, they took in 8 pieces of evidence. Tell us about that.
It was the ejected round from the officer's gun, the misfire, or the jam, the cartridge. They had an ATF dog come out the next day. That officer testified his dog found that cartridge within a minute or 2.
That's what I'm talking about. Yay for
The-
dogs.
Yeah, so the holster, cell phone, black and mild, the shell casing, the bullet, I can't remember. Oh, the shoe was one of them. I can't remember what the other one was.
Wasn't it another cell phone?
No, I said cell phone, yeah.
But didn't he have
so
2
whenever he
cell
went-
phones?
Yeah, so whenever he testified, they asked him what he had on him whenever he was arrested, and he said, I had a cell phone, and I think he said a cell phone and a gun is all he had.
Right. But in the body cam footage that you watched, you clearly see him throw the black and mild, right? The black and mild and the cell phone.
You don't see it because I think that happens immediately, so that happens as that officer's turning.
So you
but
don't see
they
him running
obviously-
with it.
They obviously do because they find it later.
Okay. All right. So now we have got through all the officers' testimony. We've gotten through all forensics testimony, what they've got in the lab, all of this. So now we're up to, let's put him on the stand.
Yeah, so yesterday morning he testifies, and he gets up there and very, very calm, very soft spoken. He would look at us every time he answered. He looks right at us. I knew that's something that they did, but for some of the others, they somehow they felt like that made him more sincere than some of the cops who didn't. They talk about, they asked him what happened. He didn't. He said, I get out of the car. Did you give a false name? This is his defense attorney. Did you give them a false name? Yes, I did. Why? He said, I didn't want to go to jail. Then he said, did you have a firearm? He said, yes, I did. Where was it at? He said it was clipped to the waistband of my sweatpants. And so the holster does have a metal clip on it. The holster was clipped to his sweatpants. And he said, after you give them your real name, did you start running? He said, yes, I did. Asked him why. He said, because I was scared. So he said he takes off running. He starts to go up as he's running, they said, so the holster is found on the street. How did the holster end up on the street? He says, I don't know. It must have come loose and fallen. Okay. So he's running, and he's running up the rocks, and he said, did you fall? He said, yes, I fell. He said, did you fall or did you stumble? He said, I fell completely down, scraped up my knees and my elbows. And he said, then I got up. Yeah.
Which is different from what the cop said.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he said, so did you hear a gunshot? And he said, yes, I did. He said, did you have the gun in your hand? He said, no. He said, the gun must have fallen down my pants and come out the bottom of my pants. And he said, so how did the gun go off? And he said, I don't know. I guess it must have hit the rocks and it fired whenever it hit the rocks. He
So
said
now
that-
we've got two that we know his firearm supposedly fired 2 shots. One that
Yeah.
he shot himself and one when the firearm hit the ground.
Yes. According to him, both misfires. So he said, did you pick up the gun? And he said, yes. Why did you pick up the gun? Because I live in that area. I have kids. I know there's kids in that area. I didn't want the gun to be left there for a kid to find.
Okay.
Yeah. So then he keeps running, and that's when he asked him, did you leave the area? His own attorney said, did you leave the area? He said, no. He said, well, where did you spend the night? He said, I spent the night in the backyard of a house by the splash pad. Delville has a splash pad for the kiddies. And then they talk about the next morning, and he said, I found it odd that you had to have seen the helicopter. You know all of these officers were out there the night before. You didn't hear, one of the other jurors said, you didn't hear an ambulance. So you know you didn't shoot anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But he just comes trotting out of the woods.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Why would he walk along the railroad tracks?
In my mind, it was like arrogance. Like, they don't know who I am. They don't know that was me. Because that's the only thing that would make sense at that point, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. How did
So
he
he-
come off to you on the stand? When he's given testimony on the stand, how did he sound disrespectful? Did he sound educated? Did it sound like he knew exactly what he was doing in a courtroom? Because, I mean, it's home away from home.
He sounded experienced, but his attorney did a very good job at keeping him to yes or no answers.
Okay. Oh, smart. Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then he said he described the next day how his attorney doesn't ask why you did this, but how he walked over the railroad tracks, encountered this other policeman, and he said, was there a shot fired? He said, yes. And he said, did he shoot at you? And he said, yes. And he said, did you ever point your gun at him? And he said, no. I never. The very few times where he actually did say something else, both times when it was asked, because he asked if he pointed the gun at the first officer, and he said, no, I never pointed my gun at anybody. And then we asked him the second time, he said the same thing, no, I never pointed my gun at anybody. And then he talks about running into the car, about the exchanges. He said, could you hear the officers? And he said, no. But you were clearly responding, especially whenever they mentioned your kids. And I could hear him say kid.
Yeah.
Then talked about, why didn't you just get out of the car? Because the door handles didn't work from the inside. Why didn't you roll down the window? Because they were electric and the battery was dead. They didn't work. He said, I kept telling him to come open the door. I was wanting to get out. Come open the door. And then they asked him, did you intend to shoot yourself? And he said, no. He said, I used the gun to break the window, and it misfired. If you really wanted to get out of the vehicle, wouldn't you have done that when they fired the first round in?
Well, if I wanted to get out of the vehicle, I probably would have just used my cell phone and called 911 and said, hey, can you tell these cops that are shooting the shit into the car to come and open the car door because I can't get out?
Yeah.
That's what I would have done. But, who am
Well,
I?
you can see the ones in front of you. They're parked in front of you in this big armored vehicle. You could wave, hey, come on.
Yeah,
You
but
can
maybe
stop
they aren't going to understand what he's trying to do. But
Yeah.
he has a cell phone on him. He could have called 911 and said, I'm the dude in the car. Somebody open the door. Okay. But who am I? I would, I just kind of think logically sometimes. Keep going.
So, so he breaks the door. He breaks the glass. We see in the evidence that was admitted that the revolver was found on the dash of this car, which means that he either shot himself, broke the glass, and then put the gun back on the dash, or he broke the glass, accidentally shot himself, and still had the sense of mind to put the gun on the dash. Instead, I would have dropped that bitch on the floor.
Right. Mhm.
And then he crawls out, and that's when they take him into custody.
All right. So is he the last person that they call? The last witness?
Yeah, they didn't call any more witnesses.
All right. Did his defense end up calling any witnesses, or was that the only defense witness?
He was the only defense witness.
Okay. So what time is this? So I know you've been. Are you leaving me?
No, my
Oh.
phone's about to die.
Oh, okay. So you've already been in court. This started on Monday. This now turns into Wednesday. Yesterday was Wednesday. And when you came home for lunch, you said to me that the prosecution rested, or did you say the defense had rested as well?
The prosecution rested on, this is Thursday. Prosecution rested on Tuesday night.
Okay. So then when you went back from lunch, you texted me and said, hey, they're going to be, we're done. We're fixing to go into deliberations. They're going to take my phone.
I didn't expect to get a lunch, honestly. So after the defense rested, they had to meet about something. And then they had to, because Delaware County, they have really small juror rooms. So they converted the courtroom into our juror room. So they said, why don't you guys take a break, be back here at 12:30, and that's when you'll start deliberations.
Okay. So is that when you came home for lunch?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then you left. All right. So you go back in, and is that when the judge does the jury instructions for deliberations?
Yeah. So go back in, and the judge goes through another set of instructions. And so whenever we left to go, when they took a recess for some reason, and we were in there before the defense rested. We were sitting in the green room, and somebody said, hey, we might as well go ahead and pick out whoever our foreman's going to be. And there was this younger girl who really wanted to be the foreman. She was trying to write down everything that was said by everybody. She went through one notebook and halfway through another one. And I was just kind of sitting there. So they said, so does anybody want to do it? And nobody really raised their hand except for her. She stood up and she's like, hell, I'll do it. And somebody said, well, who here has experience on a jury before? So I raised my hand. It was me and two other people. And somebody else said, well, I think it should be one of them three. And they said, do any of you have a problem being the foreperson? And the lady who had been on the jury before, she said, I don't want to do it. So then the younger girl's like, hell, I'll do it. She said it again. I'll just do it. So then somebody, a younger kid, a younger boy points at me and he says, I think he should be it. And I said, I'm good either way. And then another guy said, well, I'm thinking of a number between, they want us to do rock, paper, scissors. And then another guy says, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 5. And there were 3 of us, me, the other guy who had been on the jury before, and then this younger girl who was kind of anxious to be that. So he picked 3. The first guy picked 3. I was going to pick 2. She picked 2, and I said, did you pick 2? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, I guess I'll go 5. And he said it was 5. So that's how I ended up being the 4 person.
Okay. So you knew that before
I came home. Yeah.
Okay. You just didn't tell me that. All right, gotcha.
So when we went back in, they asked the bailiff asked who the 4 person was, and I said it was me, and she said, okay, so if you need a break, then she said, you need to knock on that door and let me know what you want. She said, if you need to see more evidence, you have to put it in writing, then you have to sign it, then you have to knock down on that door and give it to me. She said, whenever that happens, all of the attorneys have to come back, and the judge has to be there because it has to be on the record. The court clerk has to be there, and then we will read your request, and we will figure out how to respond. We all knew we wanted to see the first video again.
Let me stop you right there. Just as your main squeeze 3 days a week. Could they be honest? Did they have trouble reading your writing? Because you have the shittiest writing. I've been with you a very long time. I still can't read your freaking writing.
So funny, because whenever you show up every morning, you have to sign in, right? And basically the way you sign in is everybody is listed there by their address, not by their name, just by their address. So you find your address and you sign. So the first day, not thinking anything about it, everybody signs, and she's going over everything. She says, Paul, are you a doctor? And I started laughing. I said, no, I'm just lazy. My signature always looks that way.
And anybody can, and your handwriting is the worst. Even over doctors, your handwriting, hands down, is the hardest ever that I've ever had trouble reading. All right, so I feel sorry for those people.
I was worried they wouldn't be able to read my questions when I submitted them, but they were able to read those. But I had somebody else write. I would have them write out what we wanted, and then I would sign it and hand it to them.
That was probably very, very smart. Okay, gotcha. All right, carry on. I just had to know that little tidbit about you.
So we knew we wanted to see the first video right away. And we also, we had a question about, so the possession of a firearm had one of the points was being used in the commission of a crime. And somebody they wanted to know what the crime was. So I submitted 2 different requests, one for the video, if we could see the video and be able to play it in slow motion. And the other one was for a clarification of what the crime was. So they came back with their responses. The bailiff was going to play us the video using the judge's laptop. And their response to the commission of the crime was, your best explanation for the crime was given to you in the instructions that were provided.
All right, can I stop you right there? Let me just get a couple. If you guys have any questions thus far, put him in chat really quick and I'll ask him. And because he's going into deliberations now. Melly Joe wants to know how many male versus female was on the jury. That's a great question.
There were, I have to go around the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was evenly split, 6 and 6.
Oh, nice. Nice. Okay. April says you're smart and beefy. Oh, fuck off, April.
Well,
I'm
thank
just
you.
kidding. Okay. All right, let's continue. All right, so
So they bring in the
yes.
laptop. Before they bring in the laptop, I said, "Hey, let's go ahead and do an initial poll. Let's see where everybody's at." So it's a little bit confusing because in the instructions they give you instruction 1, instruction 2, instruction 3, but the counts have different numbers, so they didn't always match up. So we got a little bit confused at first. So we had to ignore the first one. I said, let's do it again since we were confused. Let's go by instruction number. So I would read the instruction number and the crime, and then people would say guilty, not guilty, undecided. So we came back. So there was, on the attempted murder initially, we were 4 guilty, 6 not guilty, and 2. On the pointing of a firearm, we were the same, 4, 6, and 2. On the 2 resisting arrest, we were unanimous, guilty, all 12 guilty. On the possession of a firearm, we were 11 guilty and 1 not guilty. And on I'm missing one thing. Oh, false identifying, we were 11 and 1 as well. I thought those 2 were odd because he literally admitted to that. So then they bring in the video. We watched the video. I think we watched that video for about an hour at different speeds, which was good because I saw things when it was slowed down. I definitely saw things that not only did I not see at first, but the prosecution didn't see at first, because if they had, they would have presented it in a different way. Because what you clearly see when it was slowed down is whenever he takes off running, you can't see him ditch the phone in the black and mild, but what you clearly see is at one point his left arm goes down, and then the holster's on the ground. So he throws the holster on the ground with his left hand.
So was the holster in his pocket? Because you said you saw the outline.
He said he admitted that the gun was in his pants in a holster. So he admitted the gun was in the holster.
So this holster that we're talking about, is it fastened by like Velcro, or is it fastened by a buckle?
To your pants, or
yeah, how does it fasten?
It had a metal clip.
Oh, so it'd be just really easy just to grab, pull out. Okay, so basically he unholstered the gun, is what you're saying, and with his left, he's got the gun in his right hand, left hand throws it on the ground, throws the holster on the ground.
Yeah, I found that it was important to me because one of the things that they asked during voir dire was they asked about intent. When does intent start? And they used the example of building a bomb. The prosecution said, if I decide I'm going, and he used his partner, if I'm going to kill Mr., I can't remember what he said his name was, using a bomb, when does my intent start? Does it start whenever I think that I'm going to do that? Does it start whenever I go buy the supplies? Does it start when I build the bomb, or does it start whenever I actually put the bomb on his car? And then they would ask certain people for their answers. They tend to focus on the women, honestly. They tried to ask everybody, especially the defense attorney. He definitely asked everybody, but they would ask more questions of the women than they did the men. They asked questions of me because I had been on a murder trial before. So the defense attorney asked more questions of me than any other man that was on the jury.
Interesting. I want to ask chat that. So when does intent start? Because intent is also how you determine if you're guilty of attempted murder or not. So if you're given the scenario that I'm going to bomb a building, okay, when does intent start? Does it start as soon as I have the thought, I want to bomb a building? Or does it start when I go buy the supplies? Or does it start when I'm building the bomb? Or does it start when I'm placing the bomb in the building? Or does it start when the bomb goes off? Anybody in chat, tell me, when do you think intent starts? Melly Joe says, when they think of doing it. JB says, declaration of intent, however. But what I'm asking you guys is, when do you believe that the intent starts? Miss Barbara says, when you bought the supplies. Okay. Give me just a couple more. Somebody put something in there that you think. And then I'm going to give you what I think. Hope says immediately, in her opinion. Lizzo says whenever they plan to do it. Okay. And for me, because we talked about it earlier, for me, it's not so much when I thought about it, because we all have thoughts all the time during the day, whatever. And some of them are good thoughts, some of them are bad thoughts. To me, it would be the minute I went to go buy supplies, because there's a reason why I'm buying supplies. Thoughts can come and go. I mean, I've thought, you know how many times I've thought about just slapping the hell out of you while you're sleeping, and I don't do it? That doesn't mean I had huh?
That's why I locked my door.
Right. But that doesn't mean I have intent. It just means that you've pissed me off and I want to punch you in the fucking face. Okay. So, same way with you. And, but intent is when I'm unlocking your door, because I'm coming for you. Okay. So, hey, hold on a minute. So if he says it, articulates it. That's what JB says. Lizzo says when they plan it and acquire it or buy supplies. What if you don't need supplies? Well, I guess if you don't need supplies, then for me, it would be the minute you start building it.
Yeah.
Hope says when you voice your thoughts. Oh, that could be different too. I guess if I'm talking to you saying, or I'm talking to Maggie saying, Beefcake's asleep and then I'm gonna go slap the shit out of him right now, then I guess that would be my intent. But if I keep it inside, maybe it's not so. Crimson says intent is when the action is irreversible. Buying a gun is not intent to commit a crime intrinsically. Okay, that's articulating it. That's premeditated. Yeah, I'm premeditating all kind of stuff. But you can be arrested for merely talking about it, correct? All right, guys, let's get back to this. So we're back in deliberations now. Let's go.
So for me, the reason that was important for me is because, for me personally, his intent started when he pulled that gun out of the holster, because he's being chased, and if he didn't intend on using the gun, he could have he was going to get arrested no matter what. He could have just as easily have dropped the gun when he dropped the holster. He could have left it in the holster and dropped it and kept running. But when he pulled the gun out with his right hand, he's running with it in his right hand, he has the intent to use it. So that's when intent started for me. And what I discovered through this process is intent is very much different for most people. Some of the jurors' intent started when he had it on him. Just because he had it on him, that was when his intent started. And others, it was hard to define. So he's running with the gun, and you do see him fall. I didn't see him fall all the way down. Officer Shorty falls completely down, like he just bites it. I will say the reason I knew that he stumbled is because he was very close to him. He was within 4 or 5 feet of him.
Wow.
Whenever he fell. Whenever the officer fell, he was within 4 or 5 feet of him. And then he gets up. I don't think he was fully on. So as he's getting up, you see Patterson's face just for a split second. You see his face as he turns around. Then you actually see the muzzle flash.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. I have to say it. I'm going to say it. I'm going to be the one to say it. That is another freaking Barney Fife move. Who in their right mind is going to take off running after a criminal that's got a gun in his hand?
I don't think he knew he had the gun in his hand, because it was asked of him. The prosecution asked, because they knew it was going to come up, why did you not search him? And he said it was his process was that he likes to cuff and then search.
Which a lot of cops do. I watch that stuff. I watch body cams. Okay, so all right, I'll give old Barney Fife the benefit of the doubt there that he may not have seen the gun. Okay, but you said you saw the gun.
Nobody, even though we were all split on many things, everybody to a person saw the gun was in his hoodie pocket. So we knew he was lying during his testimony.
Oh, wow. Okay. Keep going.
So you see his face for just a split second, because Officer Shorty turns on a flashlight from somewhere, and then you can see his face, then you see the muzzle flash, and then you hear Shorty going, "Oh shit," and he starts backing up and he pulls his gun. Then he yells, "Shots fired." So then that was kind of the end of the video. We watched it. This video couldn't have been 10 minutes in total length, because it included all of the stop, everything that happened with the stop. But we were pretty much focused on from the time he got out of the car until the end.
So when the officer yelled "shots fired," it was actually himself that fired a shot.
No, he tried, but his gun jammed.
That's right. Okay, but you said he recocked it.
He re-racked, but he never shot again.
Okay.
He never shot.
All right. So keep going. So you guys watched the video and all that
over and over again. And you're not allowed to talk about it when the bailiff is in the room. We could watch the video, but we couldn't say anything. People were just naturally saying stuff, so she eventually plugged her ears, so she couldn't hear what was being said. And it was on a laptop. It was a larger laptop, but it was on a laptop, so we were taking turns going up and sitting closer to the screen so we could see things. So then she leaves. I do another poll, because we had just seen this critical piece of evidence. After that, I said, hey, let's focus on the ones where we're close. So we're guilty on these 2 accounts of resisting. We're 11-1 on these other 2. And I said, let's try to clean those up. What questions can we answer? Which naturally forces that person to kind of admit who they are, right? But I did say, if you're not comfortable talking about it, we can all just pass around a piece of paper and you can write the questions or something. And the guy said, no. He goes, I'm comfortable. He said, for me, it says the gun would have been needed to be used during the commission of a crime. He goes, I just don't see the crime. He said he was a passenger in this car. It was pulled over. So we had to walk him through, get his mind to understand that the crime actually was failure to appear. It wasn't anything that happened during the traffic stop. He had the possession of the firearm, but the crime was failure to appear. That's why he was being arrested. So
Okay.
after we,
I have to ask this for Barbara Smith. She wants to know, did Old and Fat ever do anything at all?
I think you might have had a burger or a Twinkie something later, but no, he did nothing. Probably still doing nothing.
All right. So
Probably
no
why they
officers
didn't put him on the stand, honestly.
no officers fired their gun only because it jammed. All right.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So I'm sorry, keep going. I had to ask that. That's fucking funny.
And I did tell one guy at one point so I ended up requesting this video 5 different times. So the last time I requested it was around 9:30, and 3 people wanted to see the video again. So we're standing at the back, and I'm talking to the guy. The alternates could be in the room, but they couldn't say anything. So I was talking to one of the alternates, and I said, you know what I've learned? And he said, what? And I said, if I'm ever going to run from the police, I'm going to do it in Delville, because none of them can catch me. And he just laughed, and he said, yeah, just don't have a gun with you. So after we got him kind of on board with guilty on the other 2, we knew we had guilty on everything but 2. So I said, let's redo another poll just for these 2. And we did. We came back split again, even 5, and 2 no, I'm sorry. We were 6, 4, and 2 guilty on attempted murder. And then we were, what were we? I'm trying to do the math in my head. 8 and 4 not guilty on the pointing of a firearm. So I said, look, I'll tell you, I'm one of the ones who voted guilty on this. And I said, here's why I voted guilty. He clearly had used the firearm before. I said, we just watched video where the gun never hit the ground. He pulled the trigger. And if he's willing to pull the trigger on somebody that's that close, a cop that's that close to him, why would he not point it? It makes sense to me that he would have pointed it at another one the next day. And then there was another kid. The other ones flipped pretty easily to where it ended up being just me. I was the only one voting guilty on this pointing of a firearm. And I said, okay, somebody convince me why I'm wrong. And they said, well, you know, they gave his age, you know, his eyesight, and they said he had to ask somebody else, is that our guy? And then they said he actually never said that he pointed his weapon, that he pointed his gun at him. And so while they're talking, I'm looking at my notes, and I had written down, never testified that the gun was pointed at him.
So he never testified that.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
He only told the Indiana State Police 3 days later, maybe 4 days later, is whenever, because they asked, why did you fire at him? And he said, because he pointed his gun at me.
Okay. And I want to be clear, because I asked you this question. Well, they could have compared that to his incident report, because you have to fill out an incident report. And what happened with that?
Yeah. And I hate to think that there would be this much deception involved, but maybe his body cam was on and they clearly saw, hey, he didn't point his gun at you.
So what happened?
You fire?
Right. So what happened with the incident report?
We never saw any of those. One of the things that I found was, honestly, it kind of threw me a little bit, because I thought we were going to get a transcript of the trial to that point, because I believe we did for the case in Oklahoma. I think we could actually go back and read anything that was said, but we couldn't. They said you took notes, you rely on your notes, and you rely on. We could request to see any of the exhibits. They brought in all of the pictures of all the exhibits. Anything that wasn't there, we could request. Like we could have. They didn't have the gun there in Oklahoma. We actually had the knife. We had the knife with what was left of it with the handle on it, and we have the piece of the knife that had broken off inside of the victim. So there was a lot of differences between the two.
So that bothers me, that even the prosecution or either side did not bring in an incident report, because you've seen many times on court cases where they're like, well, I can't remember this, I can't remember that. And they're like, would you like to see your testimony given to the grand jury? Or would you like to see your interview with the police? Or they ask the police, would it help you to see your incident report that you wrote on it? And they'll say yes. So it just blows me away that they did not bring in the incident, because wouldn't that clear up a little bit, since he didn't bother to say until 3 days later verbally that I tried to fire because he fired at me, but yet if it was written in his incident report, that would corroborate.
Yeah.
But you guys weren't privy to that.
Well,
Melly Joe wants to know, what do you think the average age of the jurors were?
I was the oldest. We found out during one of the breaks in the yard that I was the oldest. The youngest was 24, I believe. I think the average, I'm going to say the average age was probably 40.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right. So go ahead.
So there were people who were thinking like you. We had this one guy, he was Peter Rabbit, because that fucker was hopping down every rabbit hole there was. He was, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? How come this guy didn't testify? And finally I said, look, we can only judge this case based on the evidence that was presented. We can't assume things. We have to go based on, it says right here, we go based on the evidence that's presented, our own experiences, and common sense. It literally. Okay.
Well, see, that's why I'm never going to be on the jury, because I would be like, you guys are fucking idiots. Who's got the case report?
Yeah.
Excuse me, lawyers. Excuse me, judge. I know it's your courtroom, but hold on. This is according to Leanie right now. Listen up, fellas. Can somebody please get us a case report here? Oh my God. That's why they don't ever ask me. I'm too much of a loud man. Okay, keep coming. Sorry.
So I said, look, at one point they were looking for something in this video. They were looking. We eventually get down to where, after many, many hours watching this video 4 times, we get down to the point where it's the 2 undecideds have swung guilty. Before that, we end up taking dinner. So we eat dinner, and it's about 6:30, 7 o'clock. And the juror that was sitting next to me, I was standing at the podium this whole time, trying to wrangle this, right?
Wrangle these little fuckers.
Trying to lead this goat rope.
Yeah, I mean, lead follower, get the hell out of the way. I got you. Go ahead.
So she was sitting in front of me, and she there were a couple people that couldn't eat pizza, so they both asked for something different, and she was one of them. They both had allergies of some type, and I noticed she is like fanning the shit out of herself, and just acting funny. She was getting up and kind of walking around and coming back and just fanning herself. And at first I thought she's having hot flashes or something. So I go down and I go and sit in the chair because we had made a big circle, and I sit in the chair that was right in front of the podium, and she's right next to me. And finally I looked at her and said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "No, I've got to leave." And it kind of got everybody's attention, and she stood up and she looked up and she said, "Guys, I'm sorry, but I got to go." And
Oh,
she's
wow.
still fanning herself. And so I get up and I go knock on the door, and the bailiff comes, and I said, "Hey, she needs to leave." And I said she's having a problem. And the bailiff comes out, and she's like, "Okay, so you can leave, but this has to be on record. So we have to get everybody back in court, and then you guys can come back in, and the judge is going to ask you if you need to leave." And this whole time she's just fanning the shit out of herself, and she's got her head down. And I said, "Okay, that's fine." And so she leaves, and this lady looks at me. She says, "I'm going to be sick." And she said, "I'm hypoglycemic. Once this starts, I can't stop it." She said, "I went too long without eating." And she said, "This kind of has to run its course." She said, "Sometimes I pass out, and I just don't want to pass out in front of everybody."
Mm-hmm.
And so then I get up again, and I go knock on the door, and the bailiff comes, and I said, "Hey, this is actually a medical emergency. She's hypoglycemic. She thinks she may pass out." That sends them down a whole different path. And she goes, "Okay, let me go talk to the judge." And I can see the judge in there. She said, "Let me go talk to the judge." She leaves the door open at this point. She goes, "You guys don't talk about anything." And they come back in, and she says, "We've called the nurse. Do you need an ambulance?" And she said, "No, I just need to go." And so that took 30 minutes. That whole ordeal took 30 minutes because the judge said, "You can't let her leave. We would be liable if she leaves here, she passes out and kills somebody." So she has to stay here until the nurse. They did call an ambulance. The EMTs came in, and they took her out of our room, moved us back into the green room, because regardless, everybody had to come back to court. So took us back to the green room, and she was down there with the nurses and stuff. And then the smokers wanted to go smoke, so you couldn't go anywhere by yourself. If one person had to go to the bathroom, everybody had to go to the bathroom. So
Oh, you men probably had a problem with that.
no,
Us
not at
women are
all.
used to that. Us women are used to going to the bathroom together.
Yeah, no, that wasn't a problem at all. So, you just couldn't get real intimate with your partner because there's other people around. So then they come back and said, "Well, let's
Well,
go
that's
smoke."
good to know.
Yeah. So we went out front to smoke this time. All the times before, they were taking us, because this is also, there are prisoners at this location. We were in the yard where the prisoners would normally go out and get sun and do exercises and stuff. That was the smoke hole because it was completely walled off. Nobody could see you. You couldn't see anybody else. This time they kind of took us a back way out of the building. We went out front, and we were standing out there, and we actually saw the defendant's son and his baby mama pull up, and they walked inside. So while we're standing there, I'm having a conversation, and it's like, "Hey, did anybody else notice that on this possession charge, that if we find guilty, it says there's a second part?" And one of the one who wanted to be the foreman, she spoke up. She goes, "Yeah, I saw that too." She goes, "I think it says there's another trial."
All right, just hold off right there just a second. I want to say hi to RC. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it so much. Y'all hit the like. I appreciate it. Maggie wants me to ask you this. And there was a reason why I wasn't asking Maggie. There was a reason because we're almost at the end of this part of it. And he would have already explained that because I know what's coming. But Maggie wants to know right now, Beefcake, was the women more lenient with their opinion than the men jurors, if that makes sense?
So my first trial, I think I was 22. So it happened the same year as the Oklahoma City bombing. It actually happened at the same time because we had to evacuate the courthouse when that happened in Oklahoma City. We were in Tulsa. So it happened, I was in court the same day that that happened. I can't remember that year, but in both instances, I wouldn't say all the women, but there are certainly some women that are extremely sympathetic to the defendant. It happened in both cases. So yes, we did have women. It ended up getting to the point where after all of this happened, we went back in. They replaced her with the only African American member of the jury.
He was a male.
He was the first alternate, yes. So they put him on, and after everything calmed down, everybody left again. That whole process took a good hour. Then I said, hey, since Kyle is here, I said, let's go ahead, because they all thought, oh shit, we got to start over. And I told one of them, like, even if we do, it's going to be really fast, because unless somebody's changed their mind, we already know where everybody stands on these others. So I said, let's just talk to Kyle. And I said, hey, Kyle, let's do this. Let me read each one of these, and we can see kind of where you're at. And if there's a difference from what we already have, we can talk through that. And he said, I'm going to make this real easy for y'all. I agree with everything she said. He said, everything she voted guilty on, I vote guilty on, and everything she said not guilty on, I'm not guilty on.
Now, was the two alternates in there the whole time you guys were deliberating?
Yes, and they're having side conversations back there, right?
Okay,
They're looking at the evidence, and they're having side conversations.
Okay, so they're not new to this. They've been in there. They already know what's going on. Gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So we're still at the same split. I think at this point, we were 6, 4, and 2. So we took another poll. Kyle spoke for quite a while, honestly, and he was very helpful in kind of explaining a different viewpoint. Very well-spoken young man. By the time he was done, I took another poll. The two undecided had, after watching the last video, watching the video the fourth time and listening to Kyle give his reasons why he felt like the guy was guilty, they swung guilty. So now we're 9-3. Yeah, we're 9-3, and somebody else that was previously guilty, the mailman, the mailman changed his plea to guilty as well. All he needed was a little bit of diverse help getting there.
All right. So are you fixing to give the verdict on guilty or not guilty without saying it? Okay. Before you do that, everybody that's been here, everybody that's still here, everything you've heard is what I've heard this morning too. And I know what my vote would have been. Put in chat if you were on this, and I know Beefcake heard a lot more, was there, days and days and days. So actually got to hear a lot more. But if you were the jury listening to this right now and what you know about the case, and I think he's pretty much given us all the high points of it, what would your verdict be right now? Would it be guilty or not guilty for attempted murder? We've got Melly Joe coming in with guilty. April's coming in guilty. Badass is coming in with guilty. Let's go, guys. Even just put in what you think it is. Absolutely no judgment at all. Anybody else want to put a verdict in that they believe this to be? All right, so there's hopes. She's got a guilty too. So we've got Miss Barbara says guilty. And Miss Barbara says guilty. We're going guilty. She's a matriarch. So we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guilties. All right, Beefcake, give it to us.
So they wanted to see the 3 holdouts wanted to see the video again, and so we requested the video again. And they also wanted to see it on a bigger screen. So they were trying to figure out if they could do that. She said, I think if we play it on a bigger screen, everybody has to come back to court. They didn't want to do that. So there was a longer conversation with the judge. While that was happening, Kyle was asking these 3, so what do you need to see? What's going to convince you? So what we had 2 teachers, 2 female teachers, and then we had another lady. One of the female teachers was 55. I don't know the other age. I would say she was 40. And then the other lady who wasn't a teacher I'm going to say she's also early to mid 50s. And we had a lot of conversation around intent. They needed to see him look at him. They needed to see the suspect look at him while he was pulling the trigger. One of them actually said, she made some kind of a statement, and I said, so if what you're saying is he didn't intend to kill him unless he actually shoots him? And she said yes. That juror, and I'm just going to say exactly what the situation was. Clearly lesbian. Visually, you could absolutely tell. Really, really short haircut. And I don't mean like short bob. I mean, she was damn near shaved. One of the last jurors that was seated, and whenever I saw that, I was like, yeah, I think, somebody who clearly is used to being different than everybody else. So okay with being different. So she was the one who the bullet had to hit him. And that, I told him, it's like, guys, if that existed, if that frame existed, we wouldn't be here, because they wouldn't need us. They would have had it on video. They would not need us. But we called them back in. They were literally the only 3 up there watching the video at this point. Watched it for probably another 20 minutes. And then,
all right, let me just stop you right there, because I know that you're fixing to give it to us, but I want to make it very clear. I know my husband, you guys, and he can be a total dick. Listen, we've got family members that are gay. Neither one of us
absolutely
think down on stuff like that. What he is saying about that, and we had a discussion about it this morning, is a lot of people will just say, they're scared to stand on their own, for whatever reason. It can be scary. That's why you always hear me say, when I'm trying to do something with the chat, like, there will be no judgment, because some people are so scared to, even if there's 12 people and you're the 12th person, and you are just not going to vote the way that these people vote. There's certain types of people that are stronger than others, and they prove it in their everyday life. And I will tell you this, and my husband and I talked about it at breakfast this morning. It is the truth that people who have been through things like what my daughter's been through with her illnesses, people who are gay, people who are transgender, people who are the minority in whatever capacity of life, they have learned to stand alone. They have a different strength than those of us. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, maybe I would just be like, oh, if I really wanted to say not guilty, I might say, if I wasn't so hard-headed, I might say guilty, because I wouldn't want anybody to think bad of me. and what he's saying there, because I don't want anybody to get the wrong. Listen, it's probably going to be put out there anyways. They done clip that shit, babe. I mean, it's going to be all over. But I want to make it clear so that it's on here that no, neither one of us are against gay people or whatever. We're just saying that people that are in some sort of minority, whether it's a color, whether it's gender, whether it's whatever, they're strong, and they're used to people coming against them for whatever their reasoning is that makes them different from quote unquote what's normal. That's what he was saying about this lady who was gay, and actually he meant it as a compliment. So
I mean,
keep going. Yes.
It's nothing against her intelligence or anything. She lives a lifestyle where she is used to being
Mhm.
she's used to being the only one in the room, if it comes to that, right? So
That's right.
I knew, and I think all of us knew, we could probably flip the other two. If we could get the other two there without them seeing the whites of his eyes, so to speak. But we were never going to get her there. She was
Mhm.
perfectly fine being the one who stood alone and kept him out of prison, because they did talk about sending and I told you this morning, I hope that they call and ask me, because they said they might ask me questions, because if they had up front said, hey, this is the maximum sentence, they're and I'm going to say it honestly was the women who were worried. They had worried for days about, they thought they were putting this guy away for the rest of his life, and that's just not the case with attempted. You don't get put away for the rest of your life with murder in most states.
Yeah.
I mean, it
And
was going to be 5 or 10 years at most.
that lady told you that she hadn't slept for 2
Hadn't
days,
slept for 2
worried
days.
about.
Yep. So
Yeah.
I
So they
said,
need to be honest with you. There's a lot that we could say about this that, you're making notes of in case they do call you, that things need to change in that courtroom, in their courtroom at least. But go ahead.
yeah, even like I said about the jury box, but we can talk about that in a minute. So
Yeah.
I said, so while they were getting the video together, I said, so if you don't see anything, are you telling me that you're not going to switch? And they said yes. I said, okay, so what you're saying is, at that point, they don't call it hung jury, they call it undecided. I said, so we're undecided. They said yes. So they watched the video. The bailiff left, everything left, and they sat down and they said, can we just think about it? Can we have 15 or 20 minutes? So we did. We sat there for 15 or 20 minutes. And so I said, so are we ready? And they said, yeah. And I said, so did you see anything? And they were all no. And even one of the teachers lives in this town, knows the officer's daughter, knows him, knows his daughter was her teacher's aide. And as we were leaving, she told me, she said, I'm going to hear about this whenever I see him next. She didn't say it like she was fearful. She just like, oh, great, I'm going to hear about this. And I said, okay, so we're undecided. So knocked on the door, had the bailiff come out and said, look, we have a verdict on 5 of the 6. We are undecided on 1. And she said, okay, let me go talk to the judge, because we knew they could go one of 2 ways. They could come back and say, too bad, spend 4 or 5 more hours. Or they could move forward. So she came out and she said, okay, we're going to send you guys all back into the green room and put the room back the way it was. And then everybody's coming back to court. The judge wants to talk to everybody. And then everybody left, and she looked at me and she said, go ahead and fill out, because they give you a folder that has all of the counts in it, and you have to fill out guilty or non-guilty for each count. She said, go ahead and fill out and sign the documents for the ones where you have a verdict, and leave the other one blank. And I said, okay. So while we're all in the green room, I'm doing that. we really didn't know what was going to happen at that point. So we go back into the courtroom with everybody there, and he.
Now this is like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
This is probably 10:30.
And the judge is there, all the lawyers are there, the defendant's there, everybody's there.
His family, yep, everybody's
Yeah,
there.
okay.
The officers, both of the officers came back. They hadn't been there since they testified the day before. They were there. They were both in uniform. So the judge had me stand up, and he said, asked me if we had reached a verdict, unanimous verdict on all counts, and I said, no, we had not. He said, which counts have you reached the verdict on? So I had to read the counts and say that we had reached the verdict on this. It didn't say what the verdict was, but we had reached the verdict.
Uh-oh, there he went. Plug it back in, Beefcake. Don't you hate when that happens?
I'm back.
Okay, there it is.
So he said, so you did not reach a verdict on count 1 for attempted murder? And I said, that's correct. And so he said, bailiff, please go get the documents. So she came over and took the documents from me. And then he read, I got to sit down, he read the verdicts on each of those counts. And he said, so the one that we're undecided on, he said, we can do a couple of different things. He said, I can read the jury instructions again and you guys can deliberate more. He said, or we can just have you just deliberate more. He said, what is your recommendation? I said, Judge, I feel like we have thoroughly gone over the jury instructions multiple times, and at this point we're undecided, and we've been undecided for several hours. And he said, oh, and he kind of laughed, and he said, well, I'm happy to hear that you thoroughly went over the jury instructions. And he's like, okay. So he said, we're going to declare this one as undecided and push it to a new trial. No, I don't think he determined if it was going to be pushed to a new trial. I think he said they was just going to be undetermined and possibly a new trial. I wasn't watching anybody. I was kind of looking at the judge because he was hard to hear sometimes. And I needed to know if he was talking to me or talking to somebody else. But they said whenever he read undecided on the attempted murder, that the defense attorney got like this really disgusted look on his face, which I told him afterwards, I said, I felt like that was the best possible outcome for him. We clearly see that the gun never hits the rocks. It's in his hand the whole time. So he lied about that. He lied about the holster. He lied about where it was. There were just several issues with the character of his character that was portrayed through his testimony. And at one point I made the comment to the jury, is like, hey, we've been talking about the defendant's testimony for almost an hour, and we seem to have completely dismissed the testimony of the officer. And coming out of video has absolutely destroyed jury trials, because you have a certain group of people that go in there, and if they don't have direct evidence, if it's not on video, it never happened. They don't care what the officer said. They don't care how many officers are saying. One of them even said, well, they're all telling the same story. I said, they said they're just telling it in different ways. I said, I would have a problem if they all came in and said exactly the same thing. There should be slight differences in their story. There should be some minor inconsistencies. The one issue I did have with Curtis, Officer Shorty, is that he couldn't remember things. Other officers or other people who testified later also couldn't remember things, but every one of them would ask if they could refer to their notes or their statements, and would do that and be able to answer those questions, and he didn't do that. I had a problem with that. Like, they asked, so what was the make and model of the car you pulled over? I don't know. they asked him something else. I don't know. I just found it very unsettling that there were things that he couldn't answer. Another issue, what they got really hung up, the jurors got really hung up on the fact that when he testified, the prosecution was actually doing their cross, and they said, so you clearly saw the muzzle flash, and he said, I actually saw two. And man, you talk about just planting doubt, because we know there were only two shots fired. We know where
And
two
one
of
of them
those shots
supposedly.
went, and he said he saw two muzzle flashes, and he could. And the defense seized on that, because whenever they talked about the dog finding the shell, he said, if there would have been another one, would your dog have found it? He said, absolutely.
Yeah.
So he
So-
just played on that doubt the whole time.
So then you guys got sent back out of the room.
Yeah, because now he said, so you I'm sure you saw that there's a second part to this possession charge. He said, so we're going to have you go back out. It's 10:30. No, it's probably 11 o'clock by now. He said, we're going to have you go back out. I'm going to prepare the instructions for the next trial, and then you will come back. And as we're leaving, I mean, people are clearly pissed. They thought they were going home. Maybe they could come back tomorrow and do this. They're talking about missing work, and the whole outside life is creeping into the whole process. And so we're sitting in the room. We'd been sitting there for probably 30 minutes, a long time for some reason. And finally the bailiff comes in, and she's holding the box with our cell phones. We had to give up our cell phones, any smart watches. You couldn't have any means of communication on you while you were in that room. And she said, we had a badge that said what juror number we were. She goes, I need your juror badges, and go ahead and find your cell phone. She said they've reached they've come to an agreement on the final piece, so we just have to go back in there so you can be dismissed. So we go back in, and we get seated, and the judge, you thanked us for our time. He said the parties agreed that the defendant agreed that he is indeed a violent felon, so you don't have to sit through the next piece. He said, so your time here is done.
And that's the first you had heard, any of the jurors had heard that he was a violent felon.
A violent felon, yep.
Wow.
Although we did know, it was obvious, and I even said at one point, look, these two guys, meaning the officer Shorty and Patterson, I said, they clearly know each other. You could just tell, and everybody in the room agreed they know each other. They both live in this small town. He's clearly had some interaction with these police. And I think the teacher from Delville, knew a lot more. And I also think that's probably why she was so firm on not guilty, is because she had doubts about the officer.
The officer. So let me ask you this, not that it matters, because, a judge is only going to let come into the trial what they're going to let come in the trial. And most trials don't allow the jury to know past wrongs that the defendant has done, so it doesn't bias their verdict. Having known his violent past, do you think the women who held out with the not guilty verdict would have been could have been, it might have changed things, looked at him different? Because you said they looked at him they felt bad for him. Yeah. Almost.
I think it absolutely would
have. Okay, so here's the other thing. Having gone through and sat 2 times on juries, how long was your first jury?
It was a week.
A week. And this one was,
it went over the weekend, because I remember we had the weekend and we couldn't talk to anybody about that for the entire weekend.
Okay.
And then we came back on the following Monday, and I think is when we started deliberations.
And then this one was a 3-day trial. Really, it was a 4-day trial because y'all went all night last night into this, and the judge was willing to go longer if he would have said okay.
Yeah.
But what is, if anybody here got called to be a juror on attempted murder or murder trial, what would be the thing that, what would be the 3 top things that you would really tell them it's important to do? Like, would it be pay attention to the victim's family? Would it be pay attention to the perpetrator? What should we really pay attention to?
I think body language. I would. The defense attorneys and the prosecutors are paid. You don't need to pay attention to them at all. They know what they're doing. But pay attention to the people that are on the stand, and pay attention to the defendant. How's the defendant acting when he's sitting there? Because they're not paid. They may have been coached, but they've probably been coached very briefly and probably not very well. Take notes. Decide. I paid attention to the people that were around me and kind of how many notes they were taking, so I knew if they weren't taking any notes, then, oh, damn, I better be taking a lot of notes because we're going to get into this deliberation and there's not going to be much information.
So because they were all taking plenty of notes, you were like going to be the eyes on it all.
Yeah, I didn't take very many notes at all.
But I got to give you this. I mean, I know you, but you have a really, really good memory too. So there's that. But so now they're going to so everything else he's been convicted on, he's going to get charged for that. Or he is charged for that. He's already been found guilty for it. So he's going to get sentenced on that, is what I'm trying to say. But they're going to do a new trial for attempted murder now.
Yeah, if they choose to.
Could they give them what's the alternative? A plea?
Either, pleading it down to I think there's unlawful use of a firearm or something like that, or I can't remember what they call it, but it's like negligent use of a firearm.
Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. All right, guys. Do you guys have anything in chat for him? Maggie wants to hear. She didn't get to hear it, I don't think. Let me just reread it again. Where Mags asks again, Beefcake, were the women more lenient in their opinions than the men? I don't know if Maggie is still sitting here. Beefcake clearly said yes. They absolutely were in both of the juries that he has sat in before. So, we think with a mother's heart, we can't help it. And not for me, I don't think with the mother's heart as much as I look at someone's expression and I look at their eyes and then I just feel sorry for them. So I would have to be the one taking the notes and not watching, staring at him going, can you really do that? Do you really, trying to analyze them by their look?
In the murder trial, actually, I remember a lady actually said, I think she broke down a little bit. She said, he just reminds me of my son. And I remember thinking, oh my God, your family's fucked up.
Oh, Lord. Hello, Wild Angel. Good to see you. Well, if nobody has anything else for Beefcake, I know he's got work to do, and I think he needs a nap. I need a nap. I need some food. I'm hungry. Before we start this Koberger thing. Melly Joe, thank you for Melly Joe stayed up all night long to listen to this. So thank you, Mel.
Yeah, thank you.
She said, I'm gonna say goodnight and thank you, Beefcake, for coming and tell us about what happens on jury duty. Good night, Leanie, Beefcake, and chat. Good night, Mel. Sweet dreams to you. Thank you for coming up. I appreciate you so much, even though I'm going to see you walk through the door here in just a minute. But from all of us at According to Leanie. We appreciate you.
You're welcome.
And I'd love to pay you, but I'm broke. I'm broke as a joke on Diet Coke.
I'll get payment later.
No.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Beefcake. Love you.
Love you.
All right, guys. There you have it. And I know that my kids were either hanging out in the bushes because they've been like, what happened? What happened? And I'm like, you're just gonna have to listen to the live. So want to send a big shout out to my kids who listened to Dad up here talk about this experience. I appreciate it. I'm so jealous. I really do want to do a jury trial one day. But I only want to do it for murder, not for attempted murder. I wish we could pick and choose. I did one time get called for it, and well, I got called because I would have been a witness. It was a drug thing, and I actually sold the guy the shit to make the drugs. Couldn't even tell you what he looked like, and I told the cops that. But anyways, he took a plea, so I didn't have to go. Bye, LJ. Love you so much. I can't believe you've been here this whole time. Give my grandbaby boy a big hug and a kiss for his mammy and pop. All right, guys. Lori said, thank you, Dad, and I just doxed her. Sorry, I dox you all the time now. Can't help it. And the whole chat is saying, thank you. I don't think he hears me, you guys. I don't care. We don't give a shit. We don't get in each other's business like that. All right? That's how we've been married so long. We just stay the hell out of each other's business. All right? Anyways, I will be back. We have Koberger question and answers and discussion coming up at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. Make sure that your bells are turned on so I can ring them. Yeah, we'll be doing that later today. I just wanted to get this on here with Beefcake, and I was like, great content. Let's get. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for hanging out with us. Miss Barbara, you're not going to be here. I haven't slept yet. Okay, you get you some sleep. And I heard JB is probably not going to be in as well because she's got something to do as well. Melly Joe just went to bed. I don't know if Lulu will wake up in time. So we'll see. We'll see. I hope the rest of y'all will. What? Live tonight, 9 p.m. Oh! Why didn't you just come in here to pimp your channel? Just kidding. Anyways, yeah, Wild Angel's got a live tonight, 9 p.m. her time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with PCT is extreme. Hopes, I know that the Koberger thing is very hard for you. No, absolutely no judgment, honey. None at all. None at all. If you can't listen, you can't listen. You take care of yourself. All right, guys. And JB, I didn't want to say what you were going to do because it wasn't my business to tell, but JB is going to be at the May Day Festival. Happy May Day to you guys. Happy May Day, May 1st. Here we go. All right, guys. I'll be back here in about an hour and a half with Mags and doing some panel guests maybe. And we're going to just talk about go back over some things we heard this week. Love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you guys have the good rest of your day. And I hope to see you on the next one here in about, an hour and a half. Love you guys so much. And see ya in just a little bit. Be good at it, guys. Bye.